the V-2 rocket, 14 meters tall, capable of striking a target over 300 kilometers away, moving faster than the speed of sound, so nobody heard it coming. Between 1944 and 1945, the V-2 killed approximately 9,000 civilians across Europe. But here is the number that changes everything. Over 20,000 people died building the V-2, more than double the number of people the rocket actually killed. The men who designed it knew this was happening, and after the war, the United States government recruited them all. May 1945. Germany is in ruins. Allied forces are advancing from every direction. The war in Europe is days from ending, and United States Army intelligence officers are driving through the wreckage, not looking for weapons caches or stolen gold, but for something they considered far more valuable: scientists. The operation was classified. It was called Project Overcast. Later it would be renamed to something that sounded more innocent, more mundane. A name chosen so that if anyone asked, it meant nothing. They called it Operation Paperclip. The program had one mission: get the top weapons scientists of the Third Reich out of Germany before the Soviet Union did. Whatever their record, whatever they had done. Wernher von Braun, 33 years old at the end of the war, arguably the most gifted rocket engineer alive, the man who had designed and perfected the V-2 rocket for Adolf Hitler. He was also an SS major. His rank was SS Sturmbannführer, equivalent to major. He had been an SS member since 1940, pressured to join by a senior SS colonel who told his superior that it would be unwise for von Braun to refuse. He had joined the Nazi Party in 1937 under similar pressure, and he had visited Mittelwerk. Not once, approximately 15 times between late 1943 and early 1945. He knew exactly what was happening inside that mountain. Mittelwerk was an underground factory carved into the Harz Mountains in central Germany. It was run by the SS. The workforce was drawn from Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp. The conditions were medieval. Workers lived in the tunnels. Sanitation was almost non-existent. Beatings were routine. Death from exhaustion and malnutrition was routine. And when workers were suspected of sabotage, or when the SS wanted to make a point, they were hanged on the production floor from the overhead cranes used to assemble the rockets. Sometimes the bodies were left for days. Over 20,000 people died across the full V-2 slave labor program. Von Braun's rockets were built on those lives. He later testified that he had been aware of the terrible conditions. He denied personal responsibility. He would spend much of the rest of his life doing exactly that. The United States government knew most of this. Not all of it, not immediately, but enough. A lawyer named Samuel Klaus, representing the State Department inside the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, reviewed the first batch of scientists proposed for recruitment. He was specific. These men, he wrote, were not merely scientists who had worked for the Nazi regime. Several were demonstrable war criminals. Recruiting them would violate American law, international agreements, and basic moral principle. His objections were overruled. The JIOA director, Bosque Webb, dismissed the concerns in writing. His memo stated that the best interests of the United States had been, quote, subjugated to the efforts expended in beating a dead Nazi horse. That memo is in the historical record. And then the Army did something that has never been fully acknowledged in any public ceremony or official statement. They altered the records. SS membership records, removed. Nazi Party membership, deleted. Investigations by Allied war crimes tribunals, quietly dropped. Letters from concentration camp survivors identifying specific scientists by name, buried. The United States Army did not simply ignore these men's histories. It physically altered their official files. It substituted clean biographies. It listed their pre-war scientific work and omitted everything that came after. President Truman had approved the program and had issued an explicit directive: no active Nazis. No active Nazi supporters. That directive was bypassed. The files were altered without his knowledge. The army decided the scientists were too valuable to lose over what Bosquet-Wev had called a dead Nazi horse. The program was renamed from Project Overcast to Operation Paperclip at this point, specifically so the name would not trigger any association with the original classified operation. More than 1,600 German scientists and technicians entered the United States under this program between 1945 and the late 1950s. Many carried biographies that had been written for them by the United States Army. Congress was never informed of the full scope. The cover-up was not an accident. It was a policy. Wernher von Braun became a celebrity. He appeared on the cover of Time magazine in 1958. He collaborated with Walt Disney on a television series about the future of space exploration, watched by millions of American families. He was appointed the first director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in 1960. He received the National Medal of Science in 1975, presented by President Ford. He was, by every public measure, an American hero. Samuel Klaus, the man who had tried to stop all of this, who had put his objections in writing and been overruled, was sidelined within the JIOA. His memo was declassified decades later. It changed nothing. Not one of the more than 1,600 scientists recruited under Operation Paperclip was ever prosecuted for war crimes. Not one. Samuel Klaus, the man who had tried to stop all of this, who had put his objections in writing and been overruled, was sidelined within the JIOA. His memo was declassified decades later. It changed nothing. Not one of the more than 1,600 scientists recruited under Operation Paperclip was ever prosecuted for war crimes. Not even one. July 20th, 1969. Wernher von Braun stood in mission control at the Johnson Space Center and watched as Neil Armstrong set foot on the surface of the moon. He wept. The achievement was extraordinary. The engineering was a genuine miracle. The courage of the astronauts was beyond question, and at the base of every Saturn V rocket that ever launched a human being into space was a design legacy that began in an underground factory in Germany, built by prisoners who had no choice. Over 20,000 people died in that program. Their names are not on any monument at Cape Canaveral. They have never been formally acknowledged by NASA. Operation Paperclip remained classified until 1990. 45 years of official silence. The space race was real. The heroism was real. And so was the cost. Some achievements cannot be separated from the methods that made them possible. This was one of them.
The history we are taught is only the surface. What lies beneath is much darker. We are just beginning to open the archives. Subscribe to Magnify History and join us as we bring the forgotten past to light.